My name is Carrie Holmes, and I am your instructor for this course. My research is in the field of language arts with a focus on vocabulary teaching and learning. This is an online course that enables you to learn from the comfort of your own home or place of your choice. I have taught reading and language arts courses for the past 12 years, and I absolutely love learning more about my field and passing this information along to my students. I am married and live in Oxford, and though education takes up the bulk of my time, I like to get together with family and friends, cook, and watch movies. I'm also a dedicated viewer of the soap opera Young and the Restless. Are there any fans out there? The goal of this course is to help you learn underlying concepts and strategies that will enable you to teach language arts in a deep and meaningful way that is now required by Common Core state standards and STEM education. All lessons that you will be going through in this course provide information to you from top experts in the field of language arts. It's really not often that you are taught by a range of well-known men and women whose names appear in most of the reference lists in the back of textbooks and of articles, but they, along with your humble professor, me, will provide you with up-to-date evidence-based information on the best way to teach and use language arts in your curriculum. Your goal for this course is to learn the most up-to-date information on the teaching of language arts. As a graduate student, you are looked up to by many others and counted on to have answers to serious problems. My goal is to help you learn important information that you can use in your profession. There are several advantages to taking an online course, and I'm sure you've thought of many of these. One of them is that you do go at your own pace, and that is to some extent. You will notice that I have provided deadlines for each of the postings, the discussion board postings that you will be using. But as far as exactly when you post them, what time of day you post them, when you watch the segments, the lessons that I've provided, will certainly be according to your own schedule. Another advantage is that you get to think about what you have to say in these discussion board postings before you say it. You can review what you said and change it before you put it up there. You can also review what your classmates have to say. In class, in a face-to-face class, often information is orally stated so quickly, and you're trying to capture those in hastily written notes, that it's very difficult to really remember what went on. In an online course, you have this information available to you. Furthermore, the oral communication is never fluid, either by the instructor or by the students contributing information. There are a lot of ahs and ums and you knows sprinkled in there. Classmates may ask questions that you already know answers to, or the instructor may say something like, "What I'm about to say builds on your knowledge of normative educational theory." And you may have no a clue about what the instructor is talking about. In an online class, you have the opportunity to dig around for the required background knowledge to make sense of the upcoming lesson and, of course, the ongoing lesson as well. There are some disadvantages. Face-to-face enables the instructor to see evidence of confusion on the faces of the students, or boredom, or excitement, and that's all lacking in an online course. Also, your ability to maintain a good schedule so that you learn the required course contents in a timely manner where they're spaced out and not all heaped up together in a last-minute effort to get caught up with the course. Good intentions for pacing your class are absolutely required. I know the feeling when you think, oh, I'm going to start exercising and eating right, and every day you think about doing that and think, well, tomorrow's a better day. I'm going to start that tomorrow. And of course, then you end up at the end, and you have a big event coming up, you want to look nice, and so you crash diet and you binge exercise in order to prepare for the big event. Well, try your very best. In fact, avoid crash studying and hastily written assignments right before due dates, because that really doesn't serve you well as far as understanding, thinking about, digesting, and again, thinking more about the course content. There's a lot of really exciting, interesting course content, but it's something you won't be able to capture on just a single viewing or a single reading of required materials. There is no accountability about your behavior in class. As I said, you may choose to, I hope not, but you may choose to view 2 or 3 lessons at one time just to get them out of the way. And of course, out of the way is not your best attitude, because again, they do contain excellent information for you. And I think when you do get into it and take it seriously, that you will want to understand exactly what is being said so that you can use it in your own classroom. There are some ways to overcome disadvantages. One is to set aside a place and time each day for your lessons, just as in a face-to-face class that time is set aside for you. Be sure you take notes based on the PowerPoint that you see. You might even note the minutes, how far into the PowerPoint slide you are, or the number, which PowerPoint slide number that you might want to go back and review, so you don't have to go back and spend your time trying to find it or reviewing the entire thing, when really you just want to gather more information about a certain certain few areas that were covered in that lesson. Be sure you stick to your schedule as much as possible so it becomes part of your daily routine. And last but not least, on overcoming the disadvantages, if you have any questions, if you have any areas of confusion, or if you have some insights on your own that you'd like to share, please email me. I would love to hear from you. The discussion postings are, and in fact all of your assignments are described in detail, and they're all posted for you. So do take time to read all of the requirements. I tried to be as explicit as possible. I bolded parts, I underlined parts, I put some in italics to point those out to you, because sometimes these were areas where my previous students in a face-to-face class left out or didn't address, and so I tried to emphasize those to you, being so I'm not going to be able to talk to you about them on a daily basis unless you email me. So read them very carefully and see exactly what it is that is required before starting in on that. The final thought that I have with this is that there are no shortcuts. You must study information on each PowerPoint, read each article, listen to each podcast and interview, study each IES practice guide, and watch each video clip. I believe you will find them absolutely fascinating and extremely useful to you as far as learning new material and connecting to what you already know. Within the PowerPoints themselves are areas, slides that are called points to ponder. And so under the realm of taking no shortcuts, do pause at these points for ponder and think about them. Make those connections to what the lesson is all about, to what you already know, and to your experiences. You do not have to write down anything to turn in on these points to ponder. They are simply a way to promote some sort of interaction during the lessons. All right, we will move to the next slide now. All of the information on this slide is information that I just went over about how to use the points to ponder and taking notes on the material as you're going through your lesson. So read this slide, but it is information that we had just, or I had just discussed with you. The lesson and objectives and educational experts. By educational experts, I mean all of the people that are going to be you're going to be introduced to through the video clips, through PowerPoints, through articles, and through IES practice guides. And all of the information about how to access them is on your course outline. So you will have no problems, I hope, finding these resources. I just checked to make sure all of the online links are active and current, and they are. So let's hope they stay active and current for the next 4 or 5 weeks. And if they are not, please let me know immediately so I can give you a new way to access information. Now, for the objectives, you are going to distinguish among the 6 strands of language arts, and I've spelled them out for you. Common Core really focuses only on reading and writing, listening and speaking, and they've embedded the viewing and visually representing it within those larger standards. But I still like to pull them out and look at them because I feel it's very important to teach students how to view materials other than text, other than the printed word, and actually to represent their ideas in ways other than writing. So I've listed all 6 for you. You will be identifying the Common Core state standards related to language arts. And there's a very interesting and rather sad, I think, phenomenon about teachers and their resistance to change. And we start right out, it's pretty close to the beginning of your set of lessons, where there's a very short video clip by a very renowned researcher who discusses some of these reasons. And I know from teaching, I did teach in first grade in Sardis, Mississippi, and I would learn wonderful things in-service workshops. But when I got back into the culture of my school and the culture of my classroom, it was a little bit harder for me to try and implement those. So I wasn't particularly resistant to change, but I found change hard to implement. So this video may give you some ideas of that, and you can look at your own teaching in view of the ideas from the video. We're also going to talk a lot about direct instruction, because direct instruction, according to the research, is a very effective way for teaching basic skills to students, and it's a very, very effective way of teaching basic skills to struggling students. Of course, the term direct instruction is misconstrued to mean just talking to students while they're sitting there bored, and that is not true. I mean, it could be true, but when done correctly, there is student interaction and exciting lessons. And so there's an article that you'll be reading and some information that you'll be reading about direct instruction. And some of the leading experts in this particular lesson are Reed Lyon and Barak Rosenshine. This slide gives you a listing of the course documents and assignments for the course. I'm going to give you an overview right now, and a fuller explanation, a more detailed explanation is posted with each one of your assignments. We'll start with the syllabus, which on page 1 gives my contact information. The best way for you to get a hold of me is through email, and it gives you my email address on the syllabus. Please don't hesitate to contact me with questions or thoughts or ideas that you have. On page 3 is the list of references for this course. There is no textbook that is required for the course, and instead you will be getting your information from multiple sources, wonderful sources, and I think you will find them very exciting, very readable, and very up to date. One of the sources is the Common Core State Standards. Along with each source, I've given you a website which, as of yesterday, worked very well. So let's keep our fingers crossed that they won't change them for the month that you'll be using these. You will be accessing something from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which you know is NAEP, and they're the ones that give the report cards on reading and math and different content areas. You will be reading a position statement by the National Association of Education of Young Children, NAEYC, on developmentally appropriate practices for young children. And even if you're teaching 6th grade or interested in the older children, it's very good to know what came before. This helps you diagnose problems, plan interventions, and know where to take them from where they are in their language development. It's also good for you if you're teaching kindergarten and 1st grade because many of the recommendations would apply to you directly. There's an interview by Dr. Todd Risley on language development in children beginning at birth, which is fascinating. His research is cited in just about every article on early childhood language development and paper on early childhood language development. There are papers and websites that you are to access. I think you will I think you'll find all of them interesting, but for the beginning of the course and it relates for your thematic unit assignment, the websites on concept mapping and the video clips on concept mapping, I think you will find very, very helpful and very interesting. The IES practice guides, IES stands for Institute of Education Sciences. Those practice guides, they have numerous practice guides. I chose just a few for you. Each one is around 50 to 80 pages. It'll be up to you whether you want to copy that, copy portions of it, or just bookmark it for easy access. I think you will find these tremendously helpful to you. There are reports and executive summaries for you to download and read, and assigned readings related to articles. These articles are available through the University of, Library database, or I found it easy to go on to Yahoo, type in the name of the article and put quotes around the title of the article and access it that way. There are many that you will come up with many hits, and there are some that will try and charge you money. I would obviously go to the ones that are free. So try both the university libraries and my method on Yahoo, and that should help you. The course objectives that start on page 5 all relate to the goals of the course that I talked about earlier. And as far as noting what you're going to learn in class, it is spelled out very nicely in your course objectives. Now, the part that you probably are most interested in are the course requirements, and there are 5. The first one has to do with the Integrated Language Arts thematic unit, and it's worth 25 points out of 100, so that's 25% of your total course grade. The first part, this is a 2-part assignment as far as explanations of what it is and what you're to do. The back page, page 2, has to do with useful information about planning thematic units. And because you're required to plan activities using both direct instruction and constructivism, I gave you examples of both ways there. So I would study those to really get a good understanding as to what the differences are between both of those approaches. For your the rubric that you're graded on, I've given you the requirement, what the criteria, and what that's worth for you, all adding up hopefully to 25 points. Number 1, you're going to create a visual map. If you recall, we've talked about the fact that you'll be seeing accessing information on creating visual maps. So I think you'll find that helpful in creating your own. The purpose of this map is to lay out all of the content areas, the major content areas, math, science, social studies, and the arts. And then to that, connect, think about the different concepts that you would teach for each of those content areas. And then create objectives. Number 2, from your visual maps, choose one of the concepts for each content area, and then go into your Common Core standards and select a language arts objective based from the Common Core standards for each concept. So for example, if you're teaching something to do with mathematics, then you might choose a language arts objective of visually representing mathematics through a graph or a chart. And so you're going to make that integration, that connection between language arts and math. You're going to choose 2 activities or strategies based on your objectives, and um, for each of your objectives. Let me start that one again. You're going to plan 2 activities that integrate language arts for each of your objectives, and 4 of these activities are to follow the direct instruction model. 4 activities are to be constructivist based. Then you will give a list of materials. You will include assessments for each objectives and include your rubrics, checklists, quizzes, tests, whatever. And then at least 8 literature connections. And following the Common Core recommendations, you're going to have 4 fiction and 4 nonfiction. Combination of poems, songs, chants, games. Include words to those or directions for those. Just for your entire unit. You don't have to do that for every objective, but for your entire unit. And then last, you should have been using the course content that you have been learning in 620 to plan your unit. I want you to list the sources and names of the experts that guided your planning of the thematic unit. And of course, these experts you heard from through podcast interviews, practice guides, video clips, articles, etc. Explain how the experts contributed to each aspect of your planning. So that pretty much sums up the integrated thematic unit for you. The discussion board postings is another major assignment. That one's worth 28 points. And I've given you a very detailed rubric on how you can earn your grades. So read that very, very carefully yourself, and that should give you a good idea as to what I'm looking for in the postings. I'm looking for deep, reflective thinking, making connections, connecting to other students' postings, etc. And that explains that. Now on the other page, this is a 3-page document. On the other page, I have it paced out for you. So you have 7 total postings. You will be doing 2 a week until you get to the last week where you only do 1. And there's a slightly different due date for that last week because classes end on Wednesday. So I have that posting for your last week of class due on Wednesday and not Thursday. So look at this carefully. I will give you feedback on your postings so you will get a good idea between my feedback and the rubric as to how you should proceed with other postings itself. All right, the syllabus quiz. I'm not going in order on here, but I think you can keep up with me. The syllabus quiz is, frankly, to get you to read the syllabus and to really understand what is required. This is a 2-point assignment and it's an extra credit assignment. So you have 100 possible points in this class. With the syllabus, you have a chance of earning 2 extra points that may help you later on, but just understanding the syllabus itself will be helpful to you as well. The syllabus course is posted and asks you questions that you can get right off of your syllabus. So that's really not, it's an important assignment, but one that would be easy for you to do. Last but not least, I will just tell you a little bit about the course outline. This is different than a class where I have specific dates where we teach each of these things because it is self-paced by you. I've given you the due dates for each of your assignments. The syllabus quiz is due on Friday of the first week of class, and then you'll have a proctored midterm that right now is scheduled on Tuesday, July the 10th. If there are any changes that come from on high, I will pass those on to you immediately, hopefully even before the course actually gets into the second week, which would be the week right during 4th of July. So you should know if there are any changes very soon into the course, but for right now, July the 10th is the scheduled date. On Monday the 23rd, this is getting toward the end of the class, is your integrated thematic unit that is due. And on Friday, July the 27th, is a comprehensive final exam that you will be completing at home and turning in to me. And that is due at 5 p.m. on Friday. I have put on for each of your lessons that you will be doing, I have given you again the links to each of the sources that you will be using for that particular lesson. I can't urge you enough to access those links, have them either some of them printed or at least bookmarked so you can look at those during the lesson. I think the best way to go through a lesson is to listen to me, as you're hopefully doing now, and then when it comes to a video clip, play the video clip. If you already have access to that ready, go ahead and do it. If you've looked at it ahead of time, do so. And also take notes on these things, because I can guarantee you that information from all of the links that you will be accessing will be included in both your midterm, in your discussion board postings, and in your exam. So that pretty much sums up a lot of information for you, so please let me know if you have any questions. All right, this slide is primarily your points, preview points to ponder. This is before you get farther along into your lesson. That's why it's called preview. And at the top, the Common Core State Standards for English Language Arts and Literacy, I've provided the website for you to go on. You are not required for this class, of course, to print all of these off, but if you don't print at least parts of them off to use throughout these lessons, then have it bookmarked as a favorite so you can get to it easily. And before I go on with the points to ponder, one thing I forgot to mention is that there is no textbook for this class. You are going to be using real documents such as the IES practice guides, and if that sounds like a mystery to you, you will find out how to get to them, and I think you will find them absolutely wonderful as far as giving you clearly stated good information about topics. So anyway, you won't be buying a textbook, but you may choose to copy some of these materials. Under Preview Points to Ponder, here are some things that you would start thinking about. What do you know about Common Core standards? And is your district using them? And of course, more and more, Mississippi has adopted the Common Core standards, and they're being phased in as we speak. So that question might be better. When is your district starting to use them? What are your gut feelings about direct instruction? I think I told you in the previous slide what some people's gut feelings are about direct instruction. What do you think? And under what circumstances do you think direct instruction would be an effective teaching strategy? And again, you can connect this to what the research says, which is most important, but also important is to what you have found in your own teaching. This next slide gives you more information about the Common Core State Standards for English Language Arts and Literacy. And as of this writing, all of 7 states have adopted Common Core State Standards. The state frameworks in Mississippi are being phased out and teachers are required to use Common Core State Standards. However, if I were you and you own a set of the Mississippi State frameworks, the 2006 revised frameworks, I would hang on to those, because the Common Core State Standards does not give you ideas for strategies to use. Mississippi State Frameworks gives you some excellent ideas for how to teach to your objectives and your goals. Furthermore, the state frameworks have some appendices that are filled with very useful information that you can use for your planning. So I would consult the state frameworks for those extras, and of course you are required now to reference your goals and objectives to the Common Core state standards. They are outlined for grades K through 12 in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And as I mentioned before, viewing and visually representing are embedded within the standards, but they're not explicitly stated. Emphasis in the Common Core standards is on content, not on pedagogy. Common Core state standards for English language arts and literacy for K-5. You have reading literature. These are some of the things, by the way, that are emphasized within the standards. Reading, literature, informational text, foundational skills, writing, speaking and listening, language progression, range, quality, and complexity of students' reading. Now, of this list that I gave you, a couple of these stand out to me in reading the standards. One is their emphasis on the inclusion of informational text, and they find that it's very important for teachers to not only expose their students to literature, but also informational text. The other one is the bottom one, range, quality, and complexity of students' reading. The Common Core Standards is known for the fact that it's requiring deep reading, deep understanding, and teachers are going to have to find strategies and ways to help them achieve that. Because this class addresses kindergarten through grade 6, I've also included the list from the Common Core state standards for grades 6 through 12. Some of you who are teaching grade 6 or are interested in grade 6 need to see a little bit of a difference to this, and I've put it in parentheses to the Common Core state standards for the younger grades. Also, even if you're a kindergarten teacher or interested in teaching the younger students, it's always good to see where your students are headed as they go up the grade, as they go through the progression of grades. So I'll just let you study this one on your own. And of course, when you are looking at the Common Core state standards, you can make a more in-depth analysis of them as well. All right, this particular slide will help you a lot because if you notice at the bottom, it does tell you some of the pages that you should be consulting. And in this case, it would be pages 11 through 58. At the bottom, with just becoming familiar with the English Language Arts Standards. Now let's go up to the top bullet. Read page 4. That gives you a description of the standards as an integrated model of literacy. There's a lot of talk about integrating literacy into all content areas, and this describes that. On page 7, there's a portrait of students who meet the standards, and I have given you a little bit of what the standards have to say about that. The students have independence, so of course you're trying to scaffold learning, teach scaffold, and then hopefully have them become independent learners. They need strong content knowledge, ability to respond to the demands of audience, task, purpose, and discipline, comprehend and critique and use technology, understand other perspectives and cultures. So embedded in just those 5 lines there really gives you a feel for what Common Core Standards is all about, and how, yes, isolated facts, basic facts are critical. They provide the foundation, but you don't want to stop with the learning of those. You want the students then to expand them and to apply them in different ways so that they can achieve the goals of the Common Core state standards. So I chose that one little passage for you just to give you a scope of the breadth and the depth of what's required to meet those standards. This is the last slide related to the Common Core standards, and it gives you an opportunity to think about some of the points that we've covered and the points that you have read within the standards themselves. One of the ways you can think about the standards is to select a grade level and identify the standards listed for reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Compare the Common Core standards with your state standards for your selected grade level. And the reason for this is to see what strategies the state frameworks may offer that would help you teach the Common Core standards. And then last, what are you happy to see included in the Common Core state standards? These are things that you will be testing your students on, and these are things that you will be teaching. So you need to know what they are, and are you happy to see them? Is there anything that you would like to see added or deleted from the standards? Did they not go far enough? Uh, or is there something there that you think is not necessary for children? So just think about the standards using these points to ponder. Now we move into a topic that I touched on briefly, and that is teacher resistance to change. You will be seeing a video, a 4-minute and 40-second video on some of the reasons of why teachers may be resistant to that change. This video is put out by Children of the Code, and that is an absolutely wonderful website. They have videos on virtually everything, and they also have interviews by leading experts, a lot of information there. So you may not have much free time during the taking of this course, but if you do, just spend a couple 5 minutes even noticing all the resources that you do have available and the great information through the Children of the Code website. I've given you a link directly to this particular film, but if you just go on their homepage, I think you will be very interested in that. Now, thinking about the video that you're about to see, it goes over some of these features. The greatest challenge is to change teachers' behavior related to reading. And then think about that. Think about that for yourself and perhaps other teachers that you've known. Because the teachers' behaviors affect all children. And then an interesting fact that I think that came out in this video is about the Barksdale reading program here in Mississippi, where Barksdale spent $44 million over 6 years in the poorest schools trying to increase reading scores. They did not have sufficient results, and that money, had that been divided among all of the children, would have been enough to send them to Harvard. So essentially, this was money that did not work for their purpose and could have spent on a better purpose. Whether sending them to Harvard or not is a better purpose, that's up to you. The identified problem for their really good faith, earnest attempt at helping children raise their reading scores through becoming better readers was teacher resistance. Continuing a little bit about what you will see, or if you've already watched it, what you have seen on the video. You are going to hear from Reed Lyon, or at least references by Reed Lyon, and Louisa Moats. Both were part of the National Reading Panel and very, very well-regarded researchers in reading education. Reed Lyon said teachers are resistant to change even when what they are doing is not effective or can be improved upon. That's interesting. Even when we know it's not quite working the way we want it, it's very hard to change to something else. These are not all child issues as far as reading results, as far as increasing reading. It's not all because of the child or the child's home life and issues related to the child. These are adult issues. Louisa Moats also found resistance to change in schools of education, policymakers, and parents. So if you have gone through a school of education, think about how you were taught. Were you taught the most current effective research? Or was that research sort of shoved under the rug or in some cases belittled? What about policymakers? Are they making policy based on political decisions, based on what they think is best without looking at the research? what worked for them when they were students, so it's good enough for teachers to use with other students. What is causing policymakers sometimes to be resistant to changing the reading curriculum? And then, of course, the parents. The tragedy of all of this resistance is that teachers want to be successful. Every teacher wants their children to learn. Also, in order to affect change, in order to be a part of change and not resist it, teachers need staff development. All right, we're now moving into the area of direct instruction. If you have not yet pondered about direct instruction in that points to ponder slide that occurred just a few slides before, I would stop and just think about direct instruction, your experiences with it, also your perceptions of it. Here are some finally 5 commonly held meanings or understandings of direct instruction. It is led by the teacher, and it can be good or bad. So whether it's good direct instruction where you're excited and wanting to hear more, sitting on the edge of your seat, or whether it's bad direct instruction where you're thinking about what you're going to eat for dinner when you get out of the class, or your mind is drifting off into any number of areas, but you are certainly not engaged. That would be, of course, bad direct instruction, and both can happen unless teachers use certain strategies and a certain sequence of events that you will see on other slides. Instructional procedures used by effective teachers, as shown in the Teachers Effective Research, uh, exist. There are ways that you can use direct instruction to be a very, very powerful instructional tool. Instructional procedures are to teach cognitive strategies, thinking, uh, learning, making connections, all the things that are happening in the mind are facilitated through direct instruction. If you're familiar with DISTAR instruction, those instructional procedures in DISTAR instruction were highly effective according to the research. And instruction where direct instruction is thought of in negative terms, where students are bored, students are passive, that certainly is a negative aspect of direct instruction if it is not used or applied correctly. All right, 5 meanings of direct instruction. The article by Barak Rosenshine, Steps for Using Direct Instruction. And this is a very critical slide. This is one that you will want to copy down, run off, or whatever, because this gives the steps for using direct instruction that have given teachers powerful learning results from their students. 1. Begin with a short review of previous learning. Begin lesson with a short statement of what the students are going to be learning, the goals and objectives. Present new materials in small steps. Have students practice after each step, and that's called guided practice. And guided practice is an essential element in direct instruction, and it's often overlooked by teachers who say they are using direct instruction. But as students are learning, you want to watch out for them, and as they need help and feedback, you need to give that to them in the beginning stages of learning. Even if the feedback is just that, yes, you're doing this correctly or you're doing this well, because that way they gain confidence in order to move forward. Be sure you give clear, detailed explanations when you are lecturing or at the lower grade levels talking to and with your students, and provide a high level of active practice. Ask questions, check for understanding. Guide students and provide feedback. So these are some of the steps that you would use in a good direct instruction lesson. According to Barak Rosenshine in his article, these are cognitive strategies that work when they are taught through direct instruction. And these have powerful effects. I see this in the literature just about any time I'm reading about how best to teach strategies, how best to teach reading comprehension, sentence combining, summarizing. For those particular areas of teaching and learning, these are absolutely best taught through a well-constructed direct instruction lesson. Strategy instruction. Whenever you want to teach them a strategy for working out a problem, a strategy for reading comprehension, a strategy for writing, any kind of strategies in any content areas, directly teach that strategy. Let them practice it under your guidance with the ultimate goal that they know it and can use it independently and apply it in many situations. Reading comprehension strategies fall under that as well. Sentence combining, strategies for sentence combining, taking choppy sentences from students' writing and have them combine sentences. Modeling is a major part of direct instruction. Showing them good examples is a major part of direct instruction. That's all part of the input through the lecture/teacher talk. And then asking your students to summarize information, whether it's orally or in writing, it's very difficult for them. They need instruction on how to take a large body of information, figure out the main points, how to sequence those main points, and then how to express them. Summarizing information is very tricky for everybody, including college students. So you need to teach your students that, and summarizing is best taught through direct instruction. The research shows that students taught these strategies and these parts of learning outperformed other students who were not given explicit direct instruction, chances for guided practice, and were taught in other ways. The last slide on direct instruction includes your points to ponder. On page 2, table 1 of the article by Barak Rosenshine, you have a list of instructional scaffolds that you can use as a teacher. And so be sure that you read those and think about how you can use those in your own teaching. Table 1 gives you results of teacher education research, which is just a way to show you that these are not good ideas thought up by somebody and never tested. These are ideas that have been tested through research time and time again, and the results can be trusted. The second point to ponder is study the list of cognitive strategies on page 3 and table 2, the results of cognitive strategy research. Also look at table 2, page 3. Revisit your thinking about direct instruction. Has it changed? How did it change? And why? The following are criticisms of direct instruction that have been made by people who much prefer a constructivist-based curriculum and quite frankly think that any direct instruction or very much direct instruction is not a good way to teach. First of all, they claim that it's authoritarian, and in the sense that the teacher leads the instruction, it is, but the teacher does take cues from the students as far as what to teach, when to teach, how to pace the lesson, and to monitor and adjust throughout the lesson. It's regimented. If you substitute the word systematic for regimented, you come up with a very powerfully well-researched way to prepare your instruction, and that is by using sequenced instruction, sequentially instruction. So systematic direct instruction is sort of an offshoot of that, and actually that is one of its strengths. Another criticism is that it promotes fact accumulation, not thinking. And If all you do is direct instruction where you do not ask higher level questions, this could be a very valid criticism, but it would be very difficult to have students do a lot of thinking if they don't have facts to think with. And so fact accumulation is not bad. It's only a bad thing in direct instruction if the teacher stops with that accumulation and does not allow students to go on to apply it in deeper ways and deeper ways of thinking. Another one is that it focuses on tests, that direct instruction somehow focuses on tests. Not sure that that's completely true, but it very well could be where you are focused on facts. Is a passive mode of teaching? That's up to the teacher. If the teacher just stands up there, lectures without noticing the students' responses, gives no input, no ways for students to provide input, doesn't do any guided instruction, which is a major, major part of direct instruction, but only does the part where there's inputting or lecturing, giving out of information, then it's definitely a passive mode of teaching. But that's the fault of the teacher, not the instructional method of direct instruction. It's been described as pouring information from one container to another, the students' heads. And that kind of is linked to the passive mode of teaching where students just sit there and have information thrown at them or poured into their heads. And hopefully after reading the article, thinking about it, and listening to the PowerPoints, you will realize that there's far more to direct instruction than that. On this slide, you'll see a report summarizing results from studies in 3 different rural districts and their results. What they did was they looked at students who had partial exposure to direct instruction, and then they were taught with other methods, and they looked at students who had full exposure to direct instructions. And if you want to read the details of this, I have the website listed above for you. But basically, the students were all at-risk students, and their status was pretty much equal. And they used the Dibble's Nonsense Word Fluency Assessments. The full exposure groups by mid-kindergarten had significantly higher scores than the partial exposure groups who didn't start receiving direct instruction until first grade. The gains by full exposure groups continued beyond kindergarten and first grade into the other primary grades, where they noticed that the full exposure groups were exposed to 40,000 more words by the end of third grade than their cohorts who had gone through in a partial exposure curriculum. The points to ponder on this slide are related to the Rosenshine's article on direct instruction. So revisit your thoughts on direct instruction and refer to his article just to see whether you have changed anything that you previously thought or had added to it. Also compare Table 1, page 2 to your knowledge of the steps of direct instruction. The steps of direct instruction are extremely important to follow when you are using that method of teaching. We now switch to the constructivist-based methods or philosophy of teaching. And there's an excellent article that I have posted, at least how you can access it on the course outline and also within this lesson. The article is Essential Criteria to Characterize Constructivist Teaching by Vakaskar, Hartle, and Whitney. And they maintain basically that constructivism is misused and misunderstood. And they provide 4 criteria for a well-constructed constructivist lesson based on 4 different classrooms that they had studied. The criteria are very important to keep in mind, just as I was mentioning that the criteria for direct instruction are important. Number one, elicit prior knowledge. 2, create cognitive dissonance. And by that, if you are familiar with Piaget and his disequilibrium, it's to keep the student just a little off balance so that that student wants to learn more, to become comfortable with the learning if necessary, and also might want to learn more out of curiosity and therefore deepen his or her knowledge. So cognitive dissonance within reason is an effective tool for teaching, especially based on the constructivist method. Application of knowledge of feedback with feedback, and this is where students get knowledge from the teacher or from uh, written text or from films or from experiences, and with that comes feedback from the teacher. And finally, the last criteria for a well-constructed constructivist lesson is reflection on learning. And when you guide your students to reflect on their learning, be sure that you include them reflecting on their strengths as well as areas for improvement. Continuing to talk about the article with the essential criteria for constructivist teaching, in Article 4, what that means is within the article that you're reading, they are citing evidence from 4 different articles that they have read that describe 4 different classroom scenarios. So don't be confused by Article 4, that title on your PowerPoint. But when you read the article, you will see that Article 4 refers to a classroom that was taught by a biology teacher named Burroughs, and they thought this was a very good example of an effective use of constructivism. One is that input that they talked about, one of those criteria, is a short lecture, and that can be by basically anybody, but it has to be by somebody who's informed, a well-informed person. And then after they have that input, then they break into cooperative learning groups where they either answer questions or apply that information in some way. And this part of the article does a good job of explaining what Mr. Burroughs did to engage the students at that point. So after you've read the Article 4, then go back and compare Burroughs's lesson with the 4 criteria of constructivism. And then because you're creating a thematic unit where you are including constructivist-based activities, think about how you can embed or use those 4 criteria in your own thematic unit. The next article that you are going to be getting is one by Robert Marzano, When Practice Makes Perfect. And I selected this article because he relates to or refers to the constructivist theory. Many people call it constructivist methods, others refer to it as a theory. However you want to think about it, I think both are right. But anyway, Robert Marzano does question the constructivist theory about how it fits into practice. And we know from research that, and you probably know from your own personal experiences, that practice is a very effective and necessary part of the learning experience. And so just where does it fit into this constructive process? And I put in a quote here, learning in an active constructive process where students generate their own understanding of contents from page 81 is a little bit hard to reconcile, perhaps, with practice. And so think about that and think, how can you include practice, which we know is necessary, with a constructivist-based lesson? Or can you? Maybe that fits more into a direct instruction lesson. That will be up to you to think about, and I'll be interested in knowing what you think. Marzano goes on to talk about elements of effective practice. It's not enough just to say we need to do a better job of helping our students practice what they've learned, but he has listed 4 things that do help students practice. 1, they need assistance. And you will notice both in the criteria for constructivism and in the criteria under guided instruction for direct instruction, assistance is a vital part of both of those methods. Number 2, on this slide, use varied examples along with non-worked examples. I put example there, I meant to say examples. Use varied examples along with non-worked examples. and that's called interleaving. And on pages 82 and 83, Marzano provides an excellent example of interleaving. That's an interesting term. It's one that current researchers are using now, so it's one that would be good for you to know. But basically, interleaving is combining non-worked examples with worked examples. Teachers have been reluctant to show students examples because they don't want them to copy the way they did things. And so when you read this article, pay attention to how the teachers did cope with that. They did it in a very interesting way, I thought, where they provided some examples and then some tasks for the students that were related but not identical to the examples that they showed. Number 3, have students think aloud. As we all do that, I'm sure, when we're by ourselves at least, but encourage them to think out loud. Oftentimes, thinking out loud, talking out loud about something helps you to really understand it better, pinpoint places of confusion, and so forth. The last one is a very interesting one about spacing practice sessions appropriately. This article says that the newer the learning, the closer together the practice sessions should be. Thinking about young children, though, you can't have prolonged practice sessions, so you're going to have to chop up several short practice sessions for them to engage in. And as you go through this course and you think about using art and music and other ways to represent information, some of these could be incorporated into practice as well. The research on this again shows that what they practice at the beginning of a practice session and the practice that occurs at the end of the practice session is most productive, and their attention span starts to wane in that middle part. So I would advise many short practice sessions where you have a lot of those beginnings and endings. This is the last slide in this in lesson 1, and here are some more points to ponder. This is trying to get you to tie together both the direct instruction and the constructivist theory of instruction, and really give some solid thought to both of these methods, because you will be using both of these methods in your classroom in a balanced curriculum or a comprehensive curriculum, and you will also be using both of these methods in your thematic unit assignment. One of the points, what are some conclusions you have made about the direct instruction and constructivist theory of instruction? Notice here I'm calling it a theory. I sort of go back and forth because it's listed in different ways by different authors. Did you note any commonalities between the two approaches to learning? And if so, what are they? And the last one, how does practice fit into direct instruction and constructivism? So this ends this lesson, and I hope that you have some good solid thinking behind you and that you enjoyed those articles.